and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm glad to stand on this motion to speak to it. This sitting of the legislature is going to have some of the fewest days of sitting that we've had. So, Mr. Speaker, it's always good to have whatever additional time we can get to sit. And let me just say, you know, in 2009, 2010, the last year of the Sean Graham government, this legislature sat for 56 days. And with the election of Premier Allward, former Premier Allward, and his government, the sitting days over those 4 years were 57 days, 54 days, 57 days, 69 days. Now, when the government changed and the Brian Gallant and the former Premier Gallant and his government came into place, they started off well, 63 days of sitting. The next year they went to 39. Third year they were at 57, not too bad back up, but then last year back down to 39. And here this government is proposing 40 days, or is planning on 40 days of sitting, if in fact they follow through with the suggestion that we sit for 2 weeks in October. As my colleague from the member for Dieppe mentioned, this has serious implications for the ability to carry out the business of this legislature from an opposition member's perspective, or private member's perspective, because we have limited time in which to bring forward bills for second reading debate, and then to try and get them, if they pass, move forward through the committee stage and to third reading, so they can be adopted. And the same goes for debatable motions, Mr. Speaker. So this is a problem. Our party, certainly our members, our caucus, didn't agree with the calendar for this sitting at all. We felt it was far too short for the reason I just mentioned. In addition, for the limited time that meant to hold the government accountable in our role as opposition members. When I say the government, I mean the Premier and the Cabinet. So that's a problem as well, Mr. Speaker. So when it came to reducing the number of hours on Thursday at PP Lock, that discussion, I was the one member who said, no, I disagree with that for these reasons. We're sitting too few days overall, Mr. Speaker, and we need to have every hour we can squeeze out of this government for sitting time. And that's why I voted no to not sitting on Thursday mornings. It's important. So as a result, there's a proposal now to sit Thursday evenings. I have no problem with that. People elect us to represent them in this legislative assembly, to work as parliamentarians, to work as lawmakers, to provide oversight on how their money is being spent by government departments, and those are important roles. They elect us to debate and bring forward proposals to solve the big challenges of our day. This all takes time, Mr. Speaker. It all takes time, and it can't be accommodated in 38, or maybe it turns out to be 40 days, or 36 or 40 days. So, Mr. Speaker, this is of concern, and that's why I would support the motion to sit Thursday evenings. Now, we've got some options potentially here. The motion doesn't exactly suggest what should happen during that time. The government might have some business to finish, but that also provides theoretically some more time for opposition members' business. And I think that this would be an opportunity for collaboration, Mr. Speaker, to determine, if this indeed passes, to determine the agenda for Thursday evening. If there's a little bit of government business left over, that should get dealt with. but the bulk of time perhaps could be spent on opposition members' business. In other words, expending the time for opposition day. That requires us sitting down with representatives of each of the parties, Mr. Speaker, to hammer that out. And I'd like to see that happen if this motion is adopted. But really, we would avoid this very debate, this very discussion, if this Legislative Assembly were able to agree on a proposed calendar that could be brought to the floor for debate, possible amendments, and then for adoption that would be in place and would guide our time in the Legislative Assembly. This is what happens in most legislatures. This is what happens in the House of Commons. House of Commons, they knew a year ahead of time when their budget was going to be presented. We need to get with the times and start locking in a calendar so New Brunswickers know what we're up to. I'm sure many members here experience the same thing as I do. People asking us are you sitting? Are you not sitting? It should be easy for people to find out whether we're sitting or not. There should be a calendar that is voted on by this Legislative Assembly, agreed to and published, that governs our sitting time, our committee times, and that will be clear to everyone, clear to all members, enabling members to plan their year out effectively. So, Mr. Speaker, certainly I would support motion 34 to extend the sitting hours through on Thursday evenings from 7 to 10. But again, I will reiterate my interest in ensuring that we have a discussion, should this pass, about how time is allocated in that period should we use it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.